It seems a little indulgent for me to stand up. My name's Tomi Lahren. I'm from One American News Network. I have a talk show on One American News called On Point with Tomi Lahren. Been on for about a little over 6 months. 22 years old. I'm the youngest talk show host, I guess, ever. From the last time I checked, I don't think there's anybody that rivals me in age as far as that goes. But Ian's coming. Okay, so we got Ian on his way, but he can come in. I mean, it's a small crowd. I don't think he's going to disturb anybody. But that's just a little bit about myself, very interested in politics. And for me, my life's mission really is to get millennials, and if those of you don't know, that's 18 to 33-year-olds, interested in politics again. And not just interested in the GOP, but interested in politics and the issues. From where I come from is if you're interested in the issues in politics, then you would naturally probably be for the GOP because you'd understand them. That's part of what our panel is about today, is politics are cool, but also how to get low-informed voters to vote, not only to be informed, but to vote GOP. And as I said, if you are informed, I don't know how you couldn't vote GOP, especially as a millennial, and we're facing a high jobless rate. We've got more millennials than ever moving back in with their parents, not being able to find a job in the market, let alone things like Obamacare. I always say what's the one thing that millennials hate more than anything is being told what to do. And we've got a government that's mandating net neutrality. Hi, Ian. Mandating net neutrality. We've got Obamacare with an individual mandate. So to me, there's no other way to look at it for millennials than to vote GOP in 2016, and that's really what all CPAC is about this year. But I will introduce my panelists, as now that we're all here, and they all have extensive resumes. So I'll give you their name, and then I'll let them kind of describe what they do, why they're on this panel, and then maybe we'll have everyone introduce themselves first, and then we'll start back at the table, and you can kind of tell us your thoughts on being cool in 2016, how we're going to get that done. But this is Deroy Murdock, and we'll let you tell a little bit about himself. He's got a very extensive resume.
Would you like just the intro now, or should I go through my full remarks?
Why don't you just do the intro now so we can kind of feel who everyone is?
Super. Hi, my name is Deroy Murdock. I'm a Fox News contributor. I'm also with the Hoover Institution on War, Revolution, and Peace at Stanford University, and a contributing editor with National Review Online. This is, I don't know what number CPAC, but my first CPAC was 1983. I've not been here every year since, but it's not my first CPAC. And I will speak later about how we can communicate with people and make sure that the language we use is the kind of words that win.
My name is Ian Walters. I'm the CPAC and ACU Communications Director. They brought me out of retirement. I held the job from 1998 and 2006. And I also play piano as a professional musician. So I'm often on tour and play lots of jazz and blues festivals, and I've always enjoyed that. I was just talking with a reporter outside, and he said, I said to him, I spent most of my 20s trying to resolve how am I going to find a career path that blended my artistic side along with my political side. And the fact is, it was all up here in the head. As long as I kept doing what I was doing, I would be just fine and be the epitome. It wasn't as hard as I thought.
Oh, my name is SABO. I'm a guerrilla artist out of Los Angeles. I can only imagine what some people are saying in Los Angeles. I don't know, man. I've been doing this for a while. I got trapped into the whole web building, design world, and I hated it. Loved politics since I was 6 years old. I became skilled at creating images, and I kind of just married the two, and I've burnt my resumes. I just said, I'm never working for people again, man. I'm going to do this even if I starve. And it just kind of took off, and I can't imagine any other way I want to live.
Yeah. Ned Ryan, founder of American Majority, do a lot of political training. We're doing a lot of the training at the Activism Boot Camp. CEO of Voter Gravity, Political Technology, and then board member of the American Conservative Union. And back in the day was a writer for George W. Bush, not a speechwriter, presidential writer, did a lot of special correspondence, proclamations for him, and also sit on the board of the American Spectator, and a variety of other things. Married, have 4 kids, live about an hour outside of D.C. That's it.
And we'll bring it back now. Deroy's got a long list of things, talking about language especially, because we all know that the terms that we choose to use, especially with the GOP, can shoot us in the foot sometimes, the way we speak. And we know the liberal media is always watching. I think SABO knows that more than anybody else, that you misspeak or you say something out of context, or the wrong word choice can really sink us. So he's going to tell us a little bit more about that.
Who, me?
Soon you will.
Oh, okay.
You can parlay off of him.
Great. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you very much for that introduction. And I was told, that is staying on. Good. That's what that's supposed to do. Thank you. It's great to be with you guys here. Appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. And what I want to say basically is that conservatives need to spend a lot more time thinking about language. The other side does this very well. We need to do a much better job of letting words do more of our work. We should think harder about this as we do something very important, which is to expand the tent. Conservatives need to reach millions of people who may not fit the conservative profile. According to recent research from Pew and from Harris surveys, roughly 35% of Americans rent rather than own their own homes. Now, you would not know this if you listen to most political speeches, which assume that every American owns a home. Political rhetoric about home ownership just zooms past more than a third of Americans. One should continue to talk about how Obama's latest brainstorm affects homeowners, for example. However, it also would be smart to refer to homeowners and apartment dwellers. It's fine to talk about how high taxes make it tough to pay the mortgage, but let's also discuss how they make it difficult to pay the rent. Now, according to the latest census data, among Americans over age 50, 15% of women and 17% of men never had children and likely never will. This equals roughly 15 million people. More amazingly, among all adults between ages 18 and 88, 31% had not had children when the last such statistical snapshot was taken in 2009. That equals a whopping 71 million people. Now, many of those folks eventually would go on to have kids, but at that particular moment, championing the children left 71 million Americans with little to no emotional connection to such appeals. And let's never forget what Homer Simpson said on this topic. Children are our future, unless we stop them now. So, when Congressman Jones says, my tax cut plan will save a family of four an average of $2,000 per year, he has talked right past 71 million people who think he's not talking to me. The congressman should keep talking about how his tax cut helps families, but he also should say what it does for childless couples and what it does for single individuals and their loved ones. If you have something to sell, don't exclude 1/3 of your potential audience. Now, about 25% of Americans are agnostic or atheist. In fact, we had somebody from Atheists of America speak on the big main stage here at CPAC yesterday. 1/3 of young Americans do not associate with any religion. Conservatives need to speak in a way that makes these Americans feel included, not excluded. Without changing policies that often are rooted in or promoted on the basis of religion, conservatives would be wise also to express secular reasons for the same positions. For example, many pro-life activists will say that they oppose abortion because every fetus has a soul that has been blessed by God. While millions of Americans will applaud such rhetoric, that also leaves millions of other people cold. At the first mention of God or the Bible, they will plug their ears, run away, and never come back again. When people ask me what I believe on this issue, I tell them that I support a woman's right to choose to have an abortion as long as she gets the signed and notarized permission of the baby. Now, that comment asserts the personhood of the baby without making any reference to religion. While that may not win over everyone, it will make some people think who would be turned off immediately by anything that sounded religious. Also, when the left slithers away from words and labels, don't take the bait. Pin that language right back on them. When the globe stopped warming 18 years ago, the left very slyly changed their pet issue from global warming to climate change. This way, even as Earth's average temperature went completely flat, they could point to every rainstorm, tornado, blizzard, or sunny day as proof of climate change. So what did conservatives do? We adopted the left's language. People on the right suddenly began debating climate this and climate that. This was mission accomplished for the left, so don't do that. When the left tries to slip out of its old skin, like a molting snake, pin its old skin right back on them. So, It's still global warming, not climate change. It's still carbon dioxide, not carbon pollution. They're still liberals, not progressives. It's still gun control, not gun safety laws. Obama signs executive orders, not executive actions. Think about it. People like action. Action means you're decisive, you're getting stuff done. People don't like being ordered around by bossy people. So why don't we call them executive orders rather than executive actions? Let's take that phrase out of our lexicon. It's still Obamacare, not the Affordable Care Act. There's still food stamps, not SNAP. And yes, there's still illegal aliens, not undocumented workers or dreamers. Now, whenever possible, take a policy that the left loves and give it a name that makes it less warm and fuzzy. For example, they used to love the estate tax. And a lot of people thought, well, if you have an estate, you have a lot of money, and so what? Somebody dies, we get some money. You know, who cares? You're rich, you can afford it. A man named Jim Martin, who runs a group called 60 Plus, got people to use the term death tax. And then people thought, wow, you're taxing dead people, people die, and you're taking away money from their relatives? That doesn't sound fair, that's not right. And all of a sudden, support for the death tax plunged, and we got the death tax rate reduced, and eventually it was eliminated for a couple of years. Unfortunately, it came back to life, it was resurrected, but for a while we actually had no death tax in this country, and that was a good thing. Another example, net neutrality. Net neutrality sounds wonderful. Nice even playing field, government's neutral. It's like a high-tech Switzerland sort of. And in fact, the FCC took over the internet yesterday. It was nationalized while everyone was focused on ISIS and beheadings and all this. And I think part of it was this wonderful phrase, net neutrality, which sounds terrific. I call it ObamaNet. The whole idea is for Obama to do to the internet what Obama has done to healthcare with Obamacare. And I wish we'd use the term ObamaNet, and I think the FCC might have been stymied had we done so. Another one is living wage. This just sounds so wonderful and warm and generous, it brings tears to my eyes. Rather than living wage, let's call it the losing wage, as in wages are so high I'm losing my job. Finally, use the language of choice. A woman's right to choose is the highest virtue in the left's pantheon. In fact, a woman's right to choose actually sits on top of their pantheon. Of course, they never explain what it is they want women to be able to choose, and we should take full advantage of this situation. So, as conservatives and libertarians, we support a woman's right to choose whether or not to join Obamacare. We support a woman's right to choose whether or not to use school vouchers. We support a woman's right to choose whether or not to join a union. And we support a woman's right to choose whether or not to buy a gun. Let the left explain why women cannot have those choices, but they can choose whether or not to have abortions, because that is the only choice that the left wants women to have. In conclusion, there's plenty of work that we on the right need to do, and there always will be. One of the best places to start is to get our words right. Thank you very much.
And I actually have a question for you, if you want to stay with her for just a second, because I'd love to, or next to me, I'd love to have you address it.
I'll answer sitting down about that.
Okay. And I have to ask you too, because you're talking about language, and that spurred something for me right now. And luckily, it's dying down a little bit. But in the past months, we've seen the uprisings in New York City as well as Ferguson, and that was predominantly took over our news over the holiday season. So that's another one of the ways that the left uses language. We had Hands Up, Don't Shoot. We had Black Lives Matter. Monikers like that got very popular on Twitter, and we had a lot of people chanting them that didn't really understand them. Before that, we had Trayvon Martin, and to me, there seems to be a racial divide in this country, and I think that the liberal media is exploiting it. I think they're making the racial divide much bigger than it actually is. What's your thought on that? How can we combat that in that language, since you spoke so well about language?
Terrific. Well, that's a huge issue, and it's something that the left uses all the time because they have nothing left. They can't talk about the great economy. They can't talk about peace and security as the planet's in flames, as the economy bumps along and goes up a little bit, then falls back down. So, how do they remain relevant? Well, let's just stir the racial pot. And what I tell people that this isn't just an unfortunate, ugly political tactic. It's much, much worse than that. Racism in this country is something that with which we've been grappling since the founding, since at least the 3/5 compromise of 1787 in the Constitution, when that was put into the Constitution. We've been dealing with this through slavery, through abolition, through the Civil War, through Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the I Have a Dream speech, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, racial preferences, and on and on and on. This has been central to the American experience, and I think we've been trying to overcome this and try to be a nation where we all can get along and put this behind us. And I think a lot of people voted for Obama thinking if we have our first black president, we'll bury the racial hatchet and we can move on in peace. Well, guess what? We're now more at this than any time in my life. And I think it's not just a matter of an ugly political tactic. I think it's as bad as having a friend of yours who's an alcoholic and is doing his best to deal with it and going to Alcoholics Anonymous and going to the meetings. And rather than being a supportive friend and saying, I'm going to do what I can to help you stay well, I say to you, hey, I just bought a bottle of Chivas. You want to do shots? And I open up and start filling shot glasses in front of you so you'll fall off the wagon. It's that disgusting. It's that despicable. And when people on the left raise the racial flag, as they so often do, if there's somebody who's a racist and deserve it, that's one thing. But they throw down the race card promiscuously. And when they do that sort of thing, we should say to them, first of all, don't run away. Stand up to them and say, shame on you. This is something we've been dealing with in this country for over 200 years. We're trying to get over it, and rather than let us heal, you're yanking the scab off the wound, and you're again treating an alcoholic not with love and compassion and concern, but pouring shots in front of him and saying, hey, you want to do a shot with me? Shame on you. Stop that. You ought to be embarrassed of yourselves. That's ugly. That's American, and you got to stop. I'd be that direct and that in your face with them, and don't run away. You need to take that kind of language and cram it down their throats.
Thank you. I agree with you. Certainly. I think that that's part of the problem, too, is that people back down because as soon as they hear the word racist, they back down immediately because that's the first way to debilitate someone is call them a racist. You can recover from almost anything, but we saw with Donald Sterling, the list goes on and on. Once you're called a racist, you're done, and you have to kind of crawl in a hole and die at that point. So.
The worst thing you can be in this country is a murderer. The second worst thing you can be is a rapist, and the third worst thing you can be in this country is a racist. So there you go. And that's why the left throws down the race card all the time. And they need to stop.
I appreciate that. Ian, you're up to bat.
Sure, I'll give a few remarks.
And you're a musician, so
I
you're
am.
the epitome of cool.
So they say. That's why we're here on the panel. If you haven't checked out Tommy's show on the One America Network, On Point, it's worth checking out. The past couple years since they've been all involved here with us at CPAC, that's become regular viewing for my wife and I at our home. She'll turn on the Fox News and I'll say, let's go over to OAN.
We're
for the
right
rest
next
of
to
the evening.
Fox News on your channel guide, by the way. We're growing and expanding. We're not on Dish and Direct yet, but most other channels, I know a lot of people here have Verizon, but we're right below Fox News. You check us out. We're conservative, but we don't have the fiery rhetoric that sometimes Fox News does. We're a little bit more even-keeled.
It's
so.
good. It's good programming, and I would encourage you to check it out.
More fair and balanced, right?
Listening to
Thanks, Ian.
Deroy talk, and knowing what I know about SABO, I have a little confession to make. These are two gentlemen who, in my mind, have figured out how to live without fear. And I can't help but feel that having grown up in Washington, D.C., having grown up in politics, having grown up in the arts, that the vitriol that's spit, the venom that's thrown on one another has often suppressed my opinions because I'm afraid of being called a racist or being called a hater or sometimes in some circles even being called a conservative. And the challenge for me has been how to resolve that, how to live a life free from fear. As Fox News and when I grew up and started working in politics 23 years ago, there was no internet. Everybody still thought the nightly news broadcast was the top of the food chain, Brokaw and Peter Jennings. And the atmosphere has changed a great deal. And I'm fascinated with this notion that we've all begun to live in bubbles, in ideological bubbles. I'm going to watch my Fox News. I'm not going to eat Ben & Jerry's, even though it's delicious. I won't support liberal companies. And these are small actions to take. It's sort of a petty engagement with the left, rather than taking a strong position against the left, as Tomi and SABO and Deroy are known for. And so one of the challenges I've always had over my life is how do you take that strong position, but in a reasonable way? And I think music is something that has helped me get over that. When you do music and you do politics, there are a lot of things that they have in common. The way that I've done politics and accumulated a good reputation and a sterling track record is by being honest, by operating with integrity, by doing my best to be a man of character, and knowing that while you may have to take some hits here and there, that you will win in the long run. It means opening one's heart. You have to be honest. You can't go out there and sing a song and play the piano and have it not be honest. You'll be seen as a fraud immediately. It really does require a connection with the world around you and allowing oneself to be in the moment, to be present. At an event like CPAC, as you know, we've got lots of folks who are out to get us. All you have to do is get on Twitter, and you can see that without reason, just by saying we're CPAC, they're going to come and attack us. We've had a very good Thursday. We've had a very good Friday. I'm very concerned, based on my experience with this event, that as the world watches us, especially the Inside the Beltway, the Huffington Post folks are saying, boy, you know, they're doing too well. I better get to work on this Friday night, and I think they may have a heavy Saturday for us. One of the articles that was written on Thursday, you know the drill, Deroy. They go through the 990 forums and they say, look at all of these evil organizations who are supporting this event. I think of these guys as our friends. These are like-minded groups who have decided to come and do this event with us. Another article that came out went to a lawsuit that I wasn't even familiar with the venue of the last hotel, and said, boy, look at how these guys just snicker and how awful they are. And since you're here, since you've been here, I hope that you would agree with me that nothing could be further from the truth. But you know, I still aspire to try to live a life without fear. It's difficult, and I'm working on it. The trick, though, I've found is to open one's heart, is to, by the way you live your life, through your actions, in your behavior, you can show liberals that conservatives don't have horns and tails, that we in fact are human beings just like the rest of us, and that sometimes there are these things that bring us together. In an unfortunate way, I think of the 9/11 honeymoon, where we forgot about politics for a moment. We all became Americans, and it would make me very sad if we were only able to forget about these things and the things that bring us together in times of duress, in times of tragedy. We've got to figure out how to elevate our rhetoric, use the right words, stick together, not let them divide us, and bring about a better change for America. We can't do all of this spending. This Obamacare thing's not going to work. We all know this. I guess the left would have you pretend that it's the right thing to do, that we ought to be caring for our fellow man with Uncle Sam's money. The fact is, we ought to be caring for our fellow man, just not with Uncle Sam's money. So we've got to find a way to connect with one another, take care of one another, be honest with one another, and open our hearts to one another. First as conservatives, then as Republicans, and then to America at large. I think music's a way to do that. I think politics is a way to do that. I think being at CPAC is a good place to start. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know if you heard his speech yesterday.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry.
no, if you're in for a treat.
No, well, see, the thing is, I didn't know we had a speech to do here. I was so focused on the one in the big room, it was like,
It's not
whoa,
a speech, it's a conversation, don't worry.
Yeah, I thought it was just going to be a Q&A. But I can literally go all week and not speak to anybody outside of on my computer or something. So, I mean, speaking to people is just not something that I do. So I mean, if I sound like an idiot, I sound like an idiot when I'm prepared, so I'm not prepared now. But you were talking about, I forget exactly what you were, and you're amazing. You're freaking amazing, man. but we were talking about living. I just wrote down a note. It's like, I didn't start really living, and this sounds cliche, but you almost have to die first. You almost have to find your place. You have to find yourself in a place where you die first, because you don't really truly live until you shed yourself of all the things society has told you is right and what you're supposed to do, and when you finally experience the kind of pain that allows you to do that, you're then able to go out in the world and find out for yourself what's right. And then, and when you're able to do that, if you're lucky, you have a good idea of what has value and what doesn't have value. And, you know, it's then I think you can find happiness. And, you know, you may find that, you know, okay, I agree with some of the leftist things. I agree with some of the right things. And you know, unfortunately, you have to vote for one of them in most cases. But right now I'm just rambling. It's like the whole language. Okay, please let me think about it. It's funny, I did a bumper sticker, like a Planned Parenthood, because I kept hearing everyone say, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. I wrote a bumper sticker for Planned Parenthood that says, Black lives are just matter. And that's based on the whole thing of how many black children are killed through abortion. So, I mean, you know, I believe the problem the right has is they have no good storytellers, because the left, I'm not even sure if they were planning on doing this, but they were very successful in convincing young people that if you're going to be a storyteller, you're just a leftist. And if you're going to be a banker, you're a Republican. And what winds up happening when that happens is all the storytellers are telling the story the same way. And that's pretty much where you find yourself. That's pretty much where we found ourselves. And so the question is, how do you change that? And let me see. Once again, please forgive me. And I quit calling them progressives a long time ago, because they're anything but. And I think, and you're right. I think it's sad that we find ourselves falling in that trap. And progressive. Dude, they're not progressives. They're fucking idiots. But anyways, I mean, yesterday, and they have full-on agendas. Yesterday, I showed up with a. Can I say the word? I mean, I showed up with a very controversial T-shirt, and someone was interviewing me, and you've got 5,000 men running around with suits, and you've got one of me running around with a T-shirt. Who do you think CNN took a photo of and put on their Twitter, the pulse of CPAC 2015? And it's like, I mean, what more do you need? And I don't mind taking arrows from the left. I don't mind taking arrows from the left. I expect it. What scares me is when they say things like that and they make it impossible for you to respond. And I, you know, in the past few years, I've learned how that hurts, how evil that is. And what that did for me is it prepared me for the fight. How are we going to defend against this in what I do? But I don't mean to drone on. But thank you. And I'd love to answer some questions. Make them hard, too.
I think he will, yeah. Steve, do you mind taking a question? We've got an audience question for you. You're going to meander over here? Okay.
I just want to address, especially those of you who actually are artists. I live in New York City, and a number of host events that are right-leaning, and we have a number of people who come to these events who are on social media under pseudonyms because they are we have musicians, we have graphic artists, people in many of these professions that are so dominated by the left that they cannot so much as even like a mainstream Republican something on Facebook without drawing attention and ire from their colleagues. And if it were to come out, for example, my musician friends say, if it came out that they were conservative, they would be blackballed and would not get any gigs. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on that. Have you had any experiences?
I think they're doing you the biggest favor in the world. And I don't mean to interrupt what you have to say. No, I think they're doing you the biggest favor in the world, because then you're truly seeing who your real friends are. And I experienced that when Bush W. was elected. I lived in Hollywood. I always loved debating and fighting politics. But something happened when he was elected. Man, this clause came out, lost a ton of friends, and you just learn who your friends are. And if what I would try and do is I would try and make what you just said as a parent as possible. That way people can see themselves in the mirror. And it's like, holy crap, I'm actually so close-minded. I closed the door on a friend that I've known for years simply because of, and they're just so indoctrinated into believing who we are because we're a Republican. Someone just needs to tell them that they're wrong. And I mean, in a crafty way. But,
I'd make a comment on that. SABO just said earlier that he's, for many years, he's caught the arrows from the left, right? I like to use a more vivid image, catching javelins. If you catch the javelin, that's one thing. What you do is take it out and throw it back at them. And when you mention these people who are intolerant to artists, etc., I would call them McCarthyites, which is about the ugliest thing you can call someone on the left. They still are obsessed with McCarthy, Joe McCarthy, the blacklist, this awful monster. People in Hollywood weren't able to write scripts because they believed in a way of life or a way of thinking that conflicted with this awful, monstrous Republican senator from Wisconsin. And he's one of the biggest demons on the left. Well, what you describe is nothing other than 21st century McCarthyism, which is people who are artists, musicians, screenwriters, what have you, who have to hide their names, hide their identities because they believe in the ideas that we're talking about at this conference. So all the left is doing is practicing the same exact McCarthyism that they still think is one of the greatest evils in American history. Well, it turns out McCarthy was correct. The American government was riddled with Soviet agents, so he was correct. And yet they won't concede that. And in fact, there's something called the Venona transcripts, I think they're called. Venona intercepts. That's the term, Venona intercepts. After the Soviet Union ended and we were able to get people into the former KGB archives, we did find, in fact, names and identities of American citizens who were working for the Soviet Union. And yes, it did turn out that Joe McCarthy was right.
it's funny, I think it's Gary Sinise started a group in Hollywood called FOA, or Friends of Abe.
That's right.
And they're these underground guys. They have their secret meetings and everything. They try and stay really anonymous. And that's where this came from. It's like Abraham Lincoln with a mask kind of a thing. And I made a poster, and I don't ask for people's permission. I do what I want. And I made an FOA poster with this image on it, and it said Friends of Abe's on it. And the text underneath it said, because McCarthy was right. And I think it's a great poster. And I put it up, and I was speaking at this, or I was at this one place, and this one guy from FOA comes up to me and says, you can't do that. I'm like, why? Well, it might piss people off. I'm like, dude, they already don't like you. It's like I get it. They don't already like you. So anyways, it's just funny. We find ourselves in a place to where you have to have all these underground secret things, and you are not supposed to piss people off. And, I don't want people to know that I'm a Republican. But I mean, these guys can dance naked with pink boas and get away. It doesn't matter. But anyways. I'm sorry.
I got to tell you, I got to push back a little bit. And feel free to push back too. I really do believe in the notion that there is such a thing as excessive provocativity that limits our ability to have conversation with the other side. I'm not willing to write off the other side yet. I think that there are a lot of things that we can say to liberals that can make them think, that can make them reconsider why they are liberals in the first place. And I believe in having that conversation and saying, you know what, maybe you're on the wrong side of things. Maybe you ought to come over here where we're reasonable, where we don't enforce lockstep orthodoxy and call it tolerance. This is where the fun is. This is where diversity of opinion really exists. And I'm not willing to give up the fight that we can convince the left that this is where the real action is. This is where you can make a difference. This is where diversity and a willingness to accept one another as we are is for real. That's the American way. They may like to think that we're doing it wrong, but I think they're mistaken.
And now I will interject my comments.
I know you were waiting. I was
being
waiting.
patient, and we will then, I'll make this very brief. Couple things. How important ideas get trivialized because we refuse to engage in the conversation. And I think that's one of the things that we have not done well. Sometimes we're afraid to go talk. To the other side, we're afraid to engage with the press. Sometimes the press refuses to be fair, but I have found that if I can be honest and have a rational conversation, that left-leaning outlets will at least listen to me and most of the time treat me fairly. So important ideas get trivialized because we refuse to engage in the dialogue. But I was sharing with Tomi the other day, we did a brief interview Wednesday afternoon about millennials and about some of the things that I witnessed when I went down to South by Southwest a few years ago. I don't know how many of you are familiar with South by Southwest. It's a great event in Austin, not exactly populated with a ton of conservatives, but fascinating event to go to. And I would strongly encourage you at some point, you've got to get down there to at least see part of it. But I realized as I was sitting there, and you'd see a lot of young people walking around with Obama shirts and definitely left-leaning. But a lot of the questions that they were asking of panelists were, how can I get my product to market? How can I make a living doing what I love with as little hindrance as possible? And I realized all of these young people were very entrepreneurial in spirits. That's what they wanted, that's what they sought, and yet what they were doing with their political activity was essentially screwing themselves for the future by voting for people that were going to make bringing their product to market so they could make a living with as little hindrance as possible, as hard as possible. And so I realized that at some level there is a real connection with the younger generation, but we're using these terms that they immediately shut down and won't listen in and have a conversation. When you start to use Republican, even limited government, free market, some of these terms, capitalism, they immediately shut down. They have been so programmed to immediately shut down when you use those terms that it is hard to have a good dialogue with them. And so I've been thinking, and again, I've not come up with any great solutions. These young people inherently want to be able to make some of these choices to live the life as they so choose, yet they are making decisions in how they're voting that are actually adverse to their goals and their hopes and their dreams. So we've got to figure out a better way to communicate to them, better terms, and I think it does start with terminology, that we can have a dialogue with them to let them understand we want you to have choices in life. We want you to be able to make as many of life's decisions as possible in the future. And I was also sharing with Tomi, it's ironic to me that we live in this iPhone app store generation where we can customize our iPhone with whatever apps we want. And we get to go choose and pick and basically say we want this one, we don't want that one, we love this one, we don't love that one. And yet this young iPhone, iTunes app generation is again voting against its own interests by voting for something that wants them to conform, that wants to be one size fits all. And so we've got to figure out how we can communicate to them in terms that they understand at the onset, yes, I identify with that, and yes, I'm willing to have a conversation with you and fully understand, that this is what I want in life. The last thing I will say is, and it's something that SABO talked about, or at least alluded to, that I think we do a very poor job of. Many times as Republicans and conservatives, we want to go straight to the head. Did you know that we're spending this much money and we're this much money in debt and the GDP is this? And people immediately shut down. We don't appeal to their hearts first. And people usually are motivated to action if you have an appeal to the heart that you can back up with the facts that go to the head. So one of the things that we do train on American Majority is how can we appeal to the heart, to the emotions, to get people to act and at the same time back up what we're saying with facts that will appeal to the head, but we want to appeal to the heart so that the hands go into motion. And we've got to figure out how to be better storytellers. And I don't think we've done a very good job of it. I will say this, one of the things that I was really excited to be a part of in this last year in 2014 was an ad that the Susan B. Anthony list did. One of my kids was born 4 months premature. She was born at 24 weeks. And as someone who's deeply pro-life, I loved it when SBA came to me and said, we want to be able to tell a story about why late-term abortions are wrong. We don't want to go in it with statistics. We don't want to go at it with facts. We want to tell a story. Would you be willing to let us use your story? And I said, absolutely. And it was great. It was a wonderful ad. But we got to tell a story. And my daughter Charlotte, she's roaming around here. But we got to tell a story. We didn't come at it from facts. We didn't start throwing figures at people. And we did it in such a way that we understood it was a very delicate, it's a sensitive subject, but we got to tell stories. And it was really, really interesting to see the response to that. And people that might not have agreed with you at the onset, at least they realize this is a powerful story, and we understand what you're getting at, and you haven't judged us, you haven't made us feel bad, you told your story. And I think we need to do a much better job of that. Appeal to the heart, back it up with facts and statistics that are true, that can appeal to the head, and then we get the hands in motion. So those are my opening comments. Thank you.
And Ned, speaking to that, as a person here that's 22 years old, and I said at the beginning of this, my life's mission is to educate millennials, but not just educate, but talk to. And that's kind of the premise of, excuse me, my show, is the conversation. I think so often young people feel talked at. And I love Fox News. I'm on One American News Network, but I grew up with Fox News and I love it. However, I'm conservative. So when I watch Fox News, they're reinforcing my beliefs. But any of my friends who are moderate or liberal, they're not going to watch Fox News. They're not getting that message. So you're not turning anyone over, or you're not educating anyone that wouldn't already listen to your message. So that's why for me, what's important is if a young person can see my face, see I'm 22, and I can talk to you about the issues and not bark at you, but really talk to you. Because I love Sean Hannity, but my friends that are liberals, when he's barking about this, that, and the other, and how bad Obama is, they immediately turn it off. They don't want to hear it. To them, they're attacking their guy, and it's just, well, you know, all they do is talk about Benghazi. All they do is talk about Obamacare and rail on Obama, and you lose that audience. And for millennials, that's especially strong because we don't want to be told by an older gentleman, you know, how we feel and what's right and what's wrong. We don't want to hear intolerance. You're not going to get through to us that way. But as Ned said, you will get through to us when you're talking about, and I know you said not to use the term limited government, but I think some of the areas we could really approach millennials on are even the smaller issues. Entrepreneurial spirit of Uber, Lyft, those things, the sharing economy, capitalism, and apps. So how many young people do we have now that are entrepreneurs that are making millions of dollars with Snapchat? They didn't even go to college, but they're making that kind of money, and they want to keep more of that money in their pocket. And who's the party that's going to do that? It's not the Democrats. It's the Republicans that are going to do that. So changing the message, changing the conversation, we don't have to change our values. We just need to change the tone in which we deliver those values and hopefully give them an alternative. And I'm glad to be a part of One America because I think we do that. And I think all of the people here do that especially well. And I think we're all kind of anomalies because none of us really fit the mold of what you would expect a conservative to be. And I'm glad we don't. I think that's part of what you were saying, Sabo, about not conforming. We don't have to be abrasive, but we don't have to conform either. So that's just my 2 cents worth on millennials, and I see a lot of millennials here too, and talk to your friends, have the conversation just about the issues. You don't even have to, like, don't mention facts and figures because they'll tune you out. Just start talking about, well, the first thing I hear them say in college campuses, more than anything when they're in college, is I would sit down with people during the 2012 election, why are you voting for Obama? And the number one thing I heard is, well, Republicans hate Planned Parenthood, and they want to defund it, and they want to get rid of it, they want to ban it. First of all, they're not going to ban Planned Parenthood, and B, you have your facts wrong. They don't want to fund abortions. They don't want your tax dollars going to fund abortions. So change the narrative, explain it to them, and a lot of people will be more conducive to our message. But it's all in the way that we do it, and we can't bark anymore because it's not doing us any good, not doing us any favors.
You know, I think one of the things that's really highly ironic, especially with the younger generation, is you know, we as conservatives, Republicans, believe in individualism. And yet many of the left's policies call for conformity. And the younger generation, when they support that, it's like, we're the guys that want you to become everything that you could be as a unique individual. And we want you to be unique individuals. We don't want you to have to conform. And so we've got to figure out a way, you know, I don't know, there's got to be a better way to say this, but almost tap into the rebel spirit of the youth of, we don't want you to conform. We don't want you to conform. We want you to be a unique individual. And if we can figure that one out, if we can figure out how to really tap into that in a meaningful, constructive way, I think we can start to persuade some of the younger generation. Because quite frankly, what are they going to be, 36, 40% of the electorate?
Bigger than the baby boomers we're rivaling by the next election.
Even
it's
in 2016.
Huge. Yeah, in 2016.
Yeah, in 2016, it's going to be a significant, more than a third of the voting populace. So there's got to be a way for us to do a much better job in really tapping into their basic inherent nature.
You know, along those lines, I think, particularly with younger people, there's an opportunity with Obamacare. If you're talking to someone who's, let's say, 25 years old or 26, who's looking at getting into Obamacare, Obamacare requires every man, regardless of age, every plan has to have pediatric vision and pediatric dental care, and you're paying for that. Now, if you're a dad and you've got kids, maybe that makes sense. But if you're a 25-year-old guy, you've just gotten out of school and you're starting your career, why do you have to pay for dental care and eyeglasses on kids you don't have? This makes no sense to me. And I think that's something where young guys might say, okay, that doesn't make any sense at all. And then if you're a young woman of 25 years old, Obamacare requires you to have birth control and maternity care, all right? So Obama demands that your uterus both be empty and full simultaneously. This is bizarre and absurd and ridiculous. Now, if you're 35 years old and you want to have kids, that's one thing. But if you're 25 years old, maybe you want to be engaged in your career, maybe you're not married, maybe you don't have kids for another 5 years or 10 years or something like that, and yet there's Obama saying you got to pay for maternity care. I thought the whole idea is to let women choose, and yet they're not able to have that choice. There's some older guy, 52 years old in Washington, D.C. saying, I know better than you, little lady, you must have this. And I think that's something that ought to outrage feminists, and from a feminist perspective, I think we ought to talk to young women about that from that standpoint, from that point of view.
As a young woman, I can agree with you on that one. Absolutely.
About being provocative, I think it's interesting when someone says, wow, you're really trying to be provocative, aren't you? So I don't try to be provocative at all, man. It's like all you really have to do is point out. I look at what someone does, like say a leftist, what they do. I try and think about it. I look at the variables. And then I just want to show them their hypocrisy or their inconsistency. And that's all you need to do to be provocative to them. And I was saying yesterday, it's like, well, I met this lady. She was telling me about her kids. She's got these 3 great kids, 22 to 25, 26, whatever. And she was telling me, oh, they're all great conservatives. And I tried to explain to her, they're not the people I'm trying to talk to. I'm trying to talk to the anarchists and the street urchins. Because your kids are fine. That's not my demographic I'm shooting for. It's like, there's no way you can't tell me we can't pitch the Second Amendment to people like this. How should I say? It's like, okay, these kids are Occupy kids, protester kids, rebellious kids. Politicians are dirtbags, cops are crooked, the military's a bunch of baby killers. You mean to tell me there's not some way we can't pitch the idea of the importance of the Second Amendment to these kids? I mean, that's what it's for. But they've just been told throughout their whole lives it's for hunting and sporting. It's like, I mean, individuality. When did it become cool to be a part of the collective hive? I mean, to be a part of the hive is to...
to lose yourself.
Yeah, well, it's not even lose yourself. I mean, you're pretty much fighting for the very structure that you're supposed to be rebelling against. It doesn't make any sense. And I would say, I'm not trying, also you're trying to drag us into the gutter with the left. It's like, I'm not trying to drag you into the gutter any more than I'm trying to drag you to church. I just want you to see things a little differently. Or in a way that I think is a story that's told in a way that you've not heard. Because I would like to think that when these little anarchists, by the time they're 18, 22, they'll be able to say, hey, I heard that message, when I was growing up, because Lord knows they heard the left's message the whole time growing up. So.
And we have to wrap up. I think our next panel is coming in, but we will take some questions if anybody has any, sir.
Yeah, I want to talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay.
It's not the tone that matters, it's the policy. If you're talking about millennials, if you're representing a movement or a party that's anti-gay marriage, pro-drug war, pro-foreign interventionism, you're going to lose those voters. How are you going to approach it on those issues?
That's one of the things that it's interesting about this event. You see a lot of kids, I think, that SABO is trying to reach at an event like CPAC. Some mohawks, some purple hair, some edgy clothing and whatnot. But if you go to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, I don't think that you'll find them as accepted. I want to try to avoid using the word establishment. What would the word be? It's more square. And it doesn't exactly allow one to express individuality. The needle we're trying to thread here is by allowing and compelling folks to behave and highlight their individuality. There still is this political reality that we can't win or affect policy without coming together. how we go about doing that, we first got to begin respecting each other's point of view and keeping our eye on the prize, not allowing the left to bog us down over silly nuances or differences that we might have one another. You've heard a lot of differences between all five of us today.
But we're all conservatives.
That's right.
We're all Republicans. So I think that's a great message, too, is that there's not one lockstep what a Republican is. People look at me, they don't think I'm a Republican. They don't think I have a brain. I have blonde hair. They look at me, they think I'm young. There's no way. You know, I'm from Orange County, right? I must be a beautician, right? I get that all the time. I ask people what they think I do. So, I mean, I'm sure you get that all the time, too. There's no way you could be
No one ever accuses me of being a beautician. I've never gotten that.
You're black. There's no way you could be a conservative. No, conservatives come in all forms. For me, personally, I'm a social moderate, I'm a fiscal conservative, and it doesn't make me any less conservative than anybody else here, because we can exist all together and have different ideas. Let the American people decide in our primaries in our election what kind of Republican you want, but let's not divide our party into factions and say you're less of a Republican than me, or you're more of a Republican than me. That's what the left loves. They cheer when we do that. When we walk out on Jeb Bush, they cheer for that because you're dividing our party. There's votes that might go to them now. So why are we doing that to each other? We're sabotaging each other.
Well, I think really quick, I think it's really foolish that you do or don't vote for someone because of one issue. It's like, first off, I could care less who you sleep with or however many people you sleep with. It's not my business. And I am a Republican, always been. But I'm sorry, once again, I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, I mean, I don't care, man. It was so. I'm so tired, man. But
I think the gay marriage issue will be less provocative. There's that word again. As it becomes more and more accepted state by state by state. I mean, as we reach, I think at this point, it's what, 25, 30 states that have gay marriage or something like that. Is it 37? Is that the number? Okay, so what is it? That's 2/3 of the states already. So I mean, just by numbers, it'll become less of an issue as a fait accompli, essentially. Sort of the flip side of that is, how do you get people who like policies on the left to understand that they probably shouldn't? And I like to use this example. I speak out against Obamacare a lot. I explain it's expensive, it takes away your freedom, it's not good medicine, and none of that sinks through. But the one issue where I see people on the left sort of scratch their heads and go, ooh, that's an interesting point. I tell them, look, Obama will not be president forever. And they look very sad in their faces. I say, you know, on January 20th, 2017, he will no longer be president, and somebody else will be president. What are you going to say if, let's say, Obamacare becomes Walker Care, and Scott Walker is the one deciding how much money we should spend on breast cancer research or AIDS funding or mental health services? What are you going to think if he's the one who's making these decisions? How are you liking government medicine now? So if you like these big government programs, you'll like them if your folks are the ones running them. But if you lose the election and the other guys are in, and the quote enemy is the one running these programs, what are you going to say when those people running the government programs you run so much? So maybe it's a good idea not to put these things in the government's place in the first place, so that Scott Walker doesn't get his hands on them.
That's fantastic.
I want to say gay people need jobs. I mean, that's another issue that also affects gay people. It's like, why does it have to be one issue? But
this president has done more to unite conservatives than anything I've seen in my lifetime. Maybe 10 years ago, it would have been before 9/11, 98, 99. This game of one-upsmanship in conservative politics began to happen when conservatives were becoming authors, and they were hitting the New York Times bestseller list. And well, I'm going to out-conservative you. Well, watch how conservative I can get. Well, I'm going to run to the right of Genghis Khan because I got to get my book deal.
He's a moderate.
And I tend to think that has played its course, especially in the past 6 years. We've really got an opportunity here to come together and make history.
And I think our next panel is encroaching in on us very slowly but surely. So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.